I was 40 years old, standing in my parents' living room on Christmas morning, and I felt like I did not belong there. The tree was full of lights. The presents were stacked perfectly. My son was smiling on the floor, tearing wrapping paper with excitement. My mother was already correcting how the ribbons were thrown away. My father sat in his usual chair, quiet and distant. My younger brother laughed loudly, like he always did. Nothing was wrong, and that was exactly what felt wrong. I had waited all year for this day, telling myself that this Christmas would feel different, that time would soften things, that age would change the way my family saw me. But as I stood there holding my coffee, watching everyone move around me, I realized something I did not want to admit. I had felt this way my entire life. My son looked up at me and smiled. He was happy. That should have been enough. But instead, I felt a tight pressure in my chest, like something important was missing and I could not name it yet. I remember thinking, maybe I am just tired. Maybe I am being dramatic. Maybe this is what Christmas feels like when you grow up. But then my mother said my name. Not warmly, not angrily, just sharply. The same tone she had used since I was a child. And in that moment, I understood something was about to come apart. By the end of that day, I would finally understand what had been missing my whole life and why it was never coming back. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. You never know who else needs to hear this story. I came home for Christmas for my son, not for myself. His name is Ethan. He is 9 years old. He still believes Christmas is supposed to feel warm. I wanted to give him memories that felt safe, even if mine never did. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who helped without being asked and stayed out of the way. My mother liked to say I was easy. My father liked to say I was strong. No one ever asked if I needed anything. My younger brother Lucas was different. He was loud, charming, and always forgiven. If he forgot something, it was funny. If I did, it was disappointing. That dynamic never changed. It just followed us into adulthood. That morning, my mother moved through the house like a manager running a perfect show. Every decoration had a place. Every moment had a schedule. When Ethan laughed too loudly, she reminded him to use his inside voice. When I reached for a plate, she told me which one matched the table better. My father watched from a distance. He always did. He avoided conflict like it might hurt him physically. Silence was his way of surviving. Lucas showed up late, as usual. Everyone laughed it off. My mother hugged him tightly and told him how good it was to see him. I stood there holding a bag of gifts, unnoticed for a moment longer than felt accidental. I told myself not to take it personally. I had spent my life learning how to do that. As the morning went on, old stories were told. Stories where Lucas was the star. Stories where I was either invisible or mentioned as an afterthought. I smiled at the right moments. I nodded when expected. Then my son leaned close to me and whispered, "Mom, why does Grandma talk to you like you did something wrong?" That question landed harder than anything else that day, because I did not have an answer. When my grandfather Henry was alive, Christmas felt different. He noticed things. He asked me how I was doing and waited for the answer. When he passed away a few years earlier, I told myself the emptiness I felt was grief. Standing in that living room, watching my son watch me, I realized it was something deeper. This was not about one holiday. This was about a lifetime of being present, but never fully included, and I was just beginning to see it clearly. The first sign that something was wrong came in small, quiet ways, not the kind that cause arguments, the kind you notice only if you have spent your whole life paying attention. After breakfast, my mother suggested we take family photos. She said it casually, like it was an afterthought, but the way she straightened the room told me it mattered to her. Everyone moved into position without being asked. My brother stood beside her. My father took his usual place behind them. Ethan was guided gently to the front. I was still rinsing my mug in the kitchen when I heard my mother say, "Okay, hold still." I stepped into the doorway and asked, "Do you want me in it?" She looked surprised, like the thought had not crossed her mind. "Oh, yes, of course. Come here." I stood at the edge, angled slightly away, holding my son's shoulder. When the picture was taken, my mother immediately checked the screen. She smiled. No one asked to retake it. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. Later, while gifts were being opened, my brother passed around a box of old ornaments my mother liked to bring out every year. She called them family history. Inside were fragile glass balls, faded ribbons, and handmade decorations from when we were kids. Ethan picked one up carefully. It had my brother's name written across it in thick marker, dated almost 30 years ago. "Who made this?" he asked. My mother smiled. "Your uncle did. He was always so creative." Ethan looked back into the box. "Did you make one too, Mom?" I waited for her to answer. I waited for a story I had never heard. "Instead," she said, "we didn't keep everything." The way she said it ended the conversation. As the morning went on, more of those moments appeared. Small corrections aimed only at me. My tone, my posture, the way I handed out napkins, each one harmless on its own. Together, they felt heavy. I tried to ignore it. I had trained myself to do that. I reminded myself I was 40 years old, that I had my own life, my own home, my own child, that I was not a little girl seeking approval. But the past has a way of finding you when you least expect it. Around noon, my Aunt Ruth arrived. She was my mother's older sister, quieter, sharper in ways my mother never noticed. She hugged me tightly and held on longer than necessary. "You look tired," she said softly. "I'm fine," I replied automatically. She nodded, like she knew I would say that. After lunch, my mother announced she had something special for Ethan. She called it a family memory box. She said it was time he learned where he came from. She placed it on the coffee table like it was something sacred. Inside were letters, photographs, small keepsakes, items carefully preserved. My brother leaned forward immediately, smiling as he recognized things. My father watched quietly. My mother narrated each item with pride. "This is from Lucas's first Christmas. That was the year your grandpa took him fishing. This letter is something your grandfather wrote for the family." Ethan listened closely. He always did. I noticed something before he did. The box was full, and yet, nothing inside belonged to me. No photos of me as a child, no notes, no drawings, no letters addressed to me. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe my things were somewhere else. Maybe this box was not meant to be complete. Then Ethan asked the question I had been avoiding. "Where are yours, Mom?" The room went quiet in a way that felt unnatural. My mother paused, then smiled tightly. "This box is just some things we kept. Not everything." Ethan frowned. "But Grandpa wrote letters. Did he write one to Mom too?" No one answered immediately. My father shifted in his chair. My brother looked down at his hands. I felt something inside me start to crack. Not loudly, slowly. "I'm sure he did," my mother said finally. "We just don't have it here." The way she said it felt rehearsed. I watched my son's face as he tried to understand. He looked at me, confused, like he was waiting for confirmation that made sense. I smiled at him. I did what I always did. I protected everyone else's comfort. "It's okay," I said. "Not everything lasts forever." But inside, something had shifted, because this was not the first time I had been missing from my own family story. Growing up, I was the one expected to help, to adjust, to understand. I was praised for being easy, but easy was just another word for invisible. When my brother struggled, support appeared instantly. When I struggled, I learned to struggle quietly. I remembered birthdays where my gifts felt rushed, school events where no one showed up because someone else needed something more urgent, conversations that ended when I entered the room. I had always told myself it was normal, that families had roles, that mine just happened to be this one, sitting there, watching my son realize something was wrong before I fully admitted it to myself. I could no longer ignore it. This was not about forgotten items. This was about a pattern, a lifetime of being present, but not preserved, needed, but not cherished, counted on, but never chosen. Later, while everyone was distracted, my Aunt Ruth came to stand beside me near the hallway. "You notice it now too, don't you?" she said quietly. I did not answer right away. She continued, "You were always expected to be okay. That's how they justified everything. I swallowed hard. I thought I was past this. You are, she said gently. But being past something doesn't mean it never hurt. Her words stayed with me. That afternoon, as the day moved forward, I stopped trying to fix things. I stopped smoothing tension. I stopped filling silence. And the silence grew louder. Every laugh that did not include me, every story that skipped over me, every glance that went around me instead of meeting my eyes. By evening, I understood something clearly. This Christmas did not feel wrong because something was missing from the room. It felt wrong because something had always been missing from my place in this family. And for the first time in my life, I was no longer willing to pretend I did not see it. That realization did not make me angry. It made me calm. And that calm scared me more than any argument ever could. By the time dinner ended, something inside me had settled into a quiet, steady truth. I was not angry. I was not shocked anymore. I was clear. That felt more dangerous than any emotional reaction I had ever had in that house. I moved through the kitchen on instinct, stacking plates, wiping the counter, doing the things I had always done to stay useful. My mother thanked me without looking up. My father nodded once from the table. My brother was already on his phone. Nothing had changed around me, but I had. I stepped into the hallway to breathe. The noise of the house faded behind me, replaced by the soft hum of the heater. The walls were lined with framed photos, arranged carefully by year, birthdays, holidays, school events. I walked slowly, really looking this time. I saw my brother at every age, smiling, celebrated, centered. I saw myself occasionally, but always on the edge, half turned, holding something, helping someone, rarely looking at the camera. It hit me then that I had never actually belonged to the story they told about our family. I had just been part of the background that made it function. I stopped in front of a photo from my high school graduation. My brother stood in the center, arm around my mother. My father's hand rested proudly on his shoulder. I was there too, standing slightly apart, holding my diploma like proof I had earned my place. I remembered that day clearly. I remembered my mother saying, "I knew you'd be fine. You always are." At the time, I thought it was praise. Now I understood it was permission to stop paying attention. Behind me, footsteps approached. I did not turn around, but I knew who it was. My Aunt Ruth stood beside me, her presence steady and calm. She followed my gaze along the wall. "They never meant to hurt you," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. "That doesn't mean they didn't," she added. I swallowed hard. I kept telling myself I was past this. "You are," she said gently. "But being past something doesn't erase it. It just means you finally see it for what it was." She hesitated, then said, "There's something I need to give you." I turned to her then, surprised. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thin envelope. It was old. The edges were worn. My name was written across the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. My grandfather's. My chest tightened. "I was asked not to give you this," Ruth said. "Your mother didn't think it was necessary. She said it would only reopen things." I took the envelope without opening it. My hands were steady, even though my heart was not. "How long have you had this?" I asked. Ruth looked down. "Years." I nodded once. That made sense. Everything made sense now. I didn't want to cause problems. She said softly. "I know," I replied, and I meant it. I slipped the envelope into my bag and thanked her. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just honestly. When I walked back into the living room, my mother was rearranging leftovers. My father was watching television. My brother was laughing at something on his phone. Ethan sat on the floor, quietly building something with his new toy. He looked up at me and smiled. That smile anchored me. I sat beside him and asked how he was doing. "Okay," he said, then paused. "Mom, can we go home tomorrow instead of staying another night?" That question mattered more than anything else that day. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "We can." He relaxed instantly, like his body had been waiting for that answer. Later that evening, after Ethan went to bed, my mother poured herself a glass of wine and finally addressed me directly. "You've been quiet," she said. "I've been listening," I replied. She frowned slightly, like that was not the answer she expected. "You're not upset, are you?" she asked. "No," I said. And that was the truth. I just understand things differently now. She studied me for a moment, uncomfortable with the calm in my voice. "Well," she said, brushing it off, "families aren't perfect." "I know," I said. She waited for more, for reassurance, for forgiveness, for me to make it easier. I did not. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and finally opened the envelope. The paper inside was yellowed and carefully folded. My grandfather's words were direct, honest, loving in a way that did not dance around the truth. He wrote that he had seen how much was expected of me, how early I learned to carry weight that was not mine. He wrote that he wished he had spoken up more, that he had assumed time would fix things. He was wrong, but he saw me. That mattered. The most painful line was also the clearest. "You learn to survive quietly," and they mistook that for strength. I folded the letter back carefully and held it to my chest. I did not cry, not yet, because something else had formed alongside the sadness. Resolve. The next morning, as we packed to leave, my mother commented on how early we were heading out. "You could stay another day," she said. "You don't have to rush." "I want to go home," I replied simply. She nodded, confused but unwilling to press. Before we left, I knelt in front of Ethan and looked him in the eyes. "Can I tell you something important?" I asked. He nodded. "Sometimes people love us, but don't know how to show it in the right way. That doesn't mean we have to stay where we don't feel good." He thought about that, then nodded again. "Okay." That was the moment I knew my decision was right. I was not going to confront my parents. I was not going to demand explanations or apologies that would never come. I was going to choose differently. I was going to stop returning to places that asked me to shrink. That decision did not come with drama, or closure, or satisfying words spoken aloud. It came with quiet certainty, and that certainty carried me out the door, into a future I was finally ready to build on my own terms. The real weight of everything did not hit me until we were already gone. The drive home was quiet. Ethan slept in the back seat, his head resting against the window, his new toys untouched beside him. The road stretched out in front of me, familiar and steady, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe without holding something in. When we got home, I unpacked slowly. I put Ethan to bed, kissed his forehead, and waited until the house was silent. Only then did I take the envelope out of my bag again. I sat at the kitchen table and unfolded my grandfather's letter carefully, like it might fall apart if I rushed. I read it once more, slower this time, letting each sentence settle instead of bracing against it. He wrote about watching me grow up, about noticing how often I stepped back so others could move forward, about how easily responsibility was placed on my shoulders because I never pushed it away. He admitted something I had never heard from anyone in my family before. He said they relied on me because it was easier than changing themselves. That sentence changed everything. I had spent decades believing I was overlooked because I was not loud enough, not needy enough, not important enough. Reading his words, I finally understood the truth. I was overlooked because I made it convenient, not because I lacked value, because I carried things without complaint. The letter did not excuse my parents. It did not soften what they had done. It simply named it. And being named made it real in a way nothing else ever had. I folded the letter and pressed it flat on the table. My hands were shaking now, but my thoughts were steady. What I felt was not grief for my grandfather. That grief had already passed. What I felt was grief for myself, for the little girl who learned early that love came with conditions, for the teenager who earned approval through usefulness, for the woman who kept returning, hoping something would finally feel different. I let myself sit with that grief instead of pushing it away. The next morning, Ethan found the envelope where I had left it. "Is that from Great-Grandpa Henry?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Can I hear it?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, not because I wanted to protect him from the truth, but because I wanted to protect the truth itself. But then I realized something important. If I did not tell my son the truth in a way he could understand, The silence would do the damage instead. So I read it to him. Not every word, not every painful detail, just enough. Enough for him to know that his mother was seen. Enough for him to understand that families can love and still fail. Enough for him to learn that feeling left out is not something you ignore. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Did it hurt? He asked. Yes, I said, honestly. But knowing the truth hurts less than pretending everything is fine. He nodded, satisfied with that answer. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. She asked if we made it home safely. She commented on the weather. She talked around everything instead of naming it. Finally, she said, "You seemed distant yesterday." "I was," I replied. She waited, expecting me to explain. "I'm not angry," I continued, "but I'm done pretending I don't notice things." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Well," she said, "you've always been sensitive." That word again. I felt the last piece fall into place. "I'm not sensitive," I said calmly. "I'm observant. And I'm done carrying things that were never mine." She did not respond. Neither did my father when I sent a short message later setting clear boundaries. I told them we would be spending future holidays at home. I did not argue. I did not justify. I did not explain. The silence that followed felt different from all the others. This one felt earned. That evening, I packed away the decorations from the trip. I placed my grandfather's letter in a small box of my own. Not hidden, not locked away, just kept with intention. As I did, I realized the big reveal was not the letter itself. It was what the letter allowed me to see. Christmas had always felt wrong, because it was built on a version of family where I was useful, but not protected, present, but not prioritized, loved in theory, neglected in practice. What was missing was not warmth, it was advocacy. And once I saw that clearly, there was no way to unsee it. The resolution was not dramatic. No shouting, no confrontation, no apology scene. It was the quiet certainty that I would not keep returning to a place that asked me to disappear. That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he asked, "Are we going back there next Christmas?" "No," I said without hesitation. "Okay," he replied, already relaxed. That was the moment everything changed. Not because my parents finally understood me, but because I finally understood myself. And that understanding closed a door that had been open too long, letting pain walk in and out freely. Christmas would never feel the same again. But for the first time, that felt like freedom. The days after Christmas were quieter than I expected. Not empty, just calm in a way I was not used to. The house felt different without the weight of anticipation, without the pressure to perform or prove anything. Ethan and I unpacked our bags slowly, laughing when we found things we forgot we brought. We made simple meals. We stayed in our pajamas longer than usual. There was no schedule, no criticism, no feeling that I needed to be somewhere else to be acceptable. I noticed how quickly my body adjusted to that peace, like it had been waiting for permission to relax. That alone told me how much tension I had been carrying for years without admitting it. I realized I had spent most of my adult life recovering from my childhood without ever naming it. I had called it responsibility, maturity, strength. But strength that costs you your sense of belonging is not strength at all. It is survival. And surviving had shaped every choice I made, from how often I apologized to how little space I took up in my own life. In the weeks that followed, I stopped reaching out first. That was a small change, but it revealed a lot. My mother called less often. When she did, the conversation stayed on the surface. My father sent short messages about weather and practical things, never about feelings. My brother barely noticed the distance. And for the first time, I did not rush to fill the silence. I did not chase clarity or closure. I let things be what they were. That was not punishment. It was honesty. I learned that boundaries do not need long explanations. They only need consistency. I also learned that not everyone will understand when you choose yourself, especially if they benefited from you not doing that before. There were moments when guilt crept in, moments when I wondered if I was being unfair or dramatic. But then I would look at Ethan, relaxed and open in a way I had never been at his age, and the doubt would fade. Protecting my peace was not selfish. It was necessary, and teaching my son that his feelings mattered, that his presence mattered, was worth every uncomfortable moment that came with change. What surprised me most was how much grief showed up after the decision was made. Not sharp grief, but deep and steady. I grieved the version of family I had hoped for, the one I kept returning for year after year. I grieved the child I had been, who learned to measure love through usefulness. I grieved the belief that if I just tried harder, stayed kinder, stayed quieter, things would eventually feel different. Letting go of that hope was painful, but it was also freeing, because hope, when it is misplaced, can keep you stuck longer than fear ever could. I did not need my parents to change for me to move forward. I needed to stop waiting. I needed to accept that some people are not capable of giving what they never learned to offer. That truth did not excuse their behavior, but it released me from expecting something they could not provide. And in that release, I found space to build something new, instead of repairing something that was never stable. Now, when I think about Christmas, it no longer feels wrong. It feels honest. It feels smaller, quieter, more intentional. It feels like home. Ethan and I started new traditions, ones that do not revolve around impressing anyone. We choose what matters to us. We talk openly. We rest. And when I look back at that last Christmas at my parents' house, I no longer feel anger. I feel clarity. I understand that what was missing was never going to come back because it was never truly there to begin with. And that understanding did not break me. It grounded me. If this story feels familiar, if you have ever walked into a room full of people who were supposed to love you and felt invisible, know this. You are not imagining it. And you are not wrong for wanting more. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking for permission to matter and start building a life where you already do.